Okay, so now that I practiced it once, my name is Maureen Welch, and I'm a recovering educator and also the executive director at the Disability Innovation Hub. I am uh, also the mother to James, who is going to appear on the camera, I hope, in a little bit. And we've had an interesting educational journey with him. You're going to join? Here we can pull right over there. He's had an interesting education journey that we will share sort of as a, um, you know, experience. And then we also have Corey Hopkins, who runs a tutoring educational coaching company called Hopkins Educational Services, I believe. Yeah. And then we also have Evan Gallena, and Evan is a licensed school psychologist and a school educational advocate. So those are the perspectives that we are going to have tonight. And then you'll also hear more about micro schooling because I actually opened a micro school during COVID that I will talk about as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the computer a little closer to some of our speakers and let them introduce themselves. And it's going to be pretty informal. Since we only have 3 to 4 speakers, I don't think we're going to go more than 25 minutes. And then after that, we'll have lots of questions and answers. So I hope that you can stick around. And we will also send out a recording of the session to anyone who registered. So if you have to step off and do some multitasking, we understand. All right, so I'm going to oh, we have someone joining us. Um, let Corey begin with a little introduction.
Thanks, Maureen. My name is Corey Hopkins.
Oh,
I
sorry.
am founder of Hopkins Education Services. I am a former special education teacher here in the state of Colorado. I left the classroom about 10 years ago to start my business because I felt like I could do more to serve the students that I work with and the families that I work with outside of the school setting because I felt like I was really limited in what I could do in the school setting to support families. So that's kind of how Hopkins Education Services was started. A lot of what we do is support families that maybe are having a challenge in the typical school setting and need to find some alternatives, some creative alternatives to support their children, whether it be while they're homeschooling and they need some guidance or assessment services. Maybe their child is not in their regular classroom and looking for alternative placement, but still needs academic and social emotional support. We can provide that as well. So we really work with families to individualize and create a plan that's going to fit their child and help their child thrive and find success. Um, all of our education coaches have a master's degree and are certified educators in the state of Colorado, so we can provide all of those service hours and minutes that might be on your child's IEP. And we can definitely help create a plan, a custom plan to support your child when maybe they've had a really negative experience at school already. So we're really here to support families when they're maybe a little lost and trying to navigate different situations outside of their neighborhood school.
Awesome. We'll let Evan go next.
Hey, everybody. My name is Evan Gallena. Meryl, thanks for the invite. And Corey, thank you for sharing. So my name again is Evan Gallena, and I am the founder and lead consultant and advocate for my company's called GPS Education Consulting. A little bit about myself. So as Maureen mentioned, I am a school psychologist. So I'm nationally certified as well as I have my credentials within Colorado. I am someone who can also relate to working in the schools for quite some time. And some of the conversation that we kind of had before we went live was just one of the huge challenges for a lot of people in the education system is just uh, the amount of need that's out there versus the amount of resources. Um, and so, my background was the moments that were most impactful for me and where I felt like my energy and effort went out and landed were when I could work with a student, with their parents or their guardians, their outside providers, with the school staff, and have detailed, thoughtful, intentional conversations to try to figure out, whether it's academic, whether it's social, emotional, behavioral, whatever is going on where the student is needing more support, figuring out what those supports need to be, coming up with really well thought out and articulated plans of how do we get the resources for that, who does what when, helping to train staff. And during those processes, like I saw some really incredible moments of change and growth in kids and um, over time, though, I found there were more and more students with need and less and less time in the day to be able to have those meaningful discussions. And, for me, when I feel like I'm not able to give my best and give the amount of attention that each kid and their family deserves, it was really discouraging. So, after working in the schools for about 10 years in Maryland, my wife um, she was coming out here to finish her medical training, and I worked at Children's Hospital Colorado doing assessments for about a year, and then I started my company when I started to notice um, how challenging it is for folks to be able to get the supports in place for their kids. And I felt like that was something that I can contribute in a meaningful way um, to help students. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And then James, can we talk a little bit about your schooling? Yeah. Want me to pull my chair over, ladies? You want to talk? You want me to talk with you? Okay. So James wants me to share a little bit about his educational journey. So not every student fits into a school system. James did really great through preschool. Kindergarten, first grade was kind of rough. We decided that, well, honestly, I was putting so much energy into getting the school team to do what I felt James needed that it was draining me empty. So I know a lot of the parents on this call probably understand. And so I decided, heck, I think I could do this. I think that we could figure out a program for him that works better. So we pulled him from the school system. We actually did an experimental year at a Catholic school, which was very interesting. Um, it wasn't necessarily the best academic placement, but it did teach me that I could uh, manage educational people that work with James. So we had different therapists that went in and different tutors and things, and also behavior therapists. So that kind of gave me the permission to say, hey, maybe you can do this on your own. So we went ahead and went full Monty, and we said goodbye schools and hello to doing a home and community-based program. So we did find a recovering special ed teacher similar to me, and she worked for us for 40 hours a week, and we're able to cover 40 hours a week for her by creatively using our Medicaid waiver, which is a shameless um, plug for get on a waiver. Talk to me about that if you're interested. And then we also combined that with ABA, RBT in order to leverage enough hours to get 40 hours for her. And then James, do you remember when you used to go up to Evergreen for your self-directed learning center? No, it's a long time ago. He was little then. Now he's 18. But he used to drive up to Evergreen with his provider, and they did a very unschooling type program where it was just materials everywhere and outdoors and nature trails, and they got to choose and make their own schedule every day. And James really thrived there. He also did a once a week forest school program where he went up and was in the forest with some very, very highly trained facilitators, and it was incredible incredibly rich social emotional work for him. And then he also had traditional tutoring and also traditional ABA, or not ABA, OT speech, the therapies, so that he could get those things through Medicaid as well. So James really benefited from that. Then we had the old COVID come. Remember that? 5 years ago. And everyone called me in the community. James also uses AAC, and so he uses augmentative communication. We're between devices right now, so that's why I'm helping him a little bit with talking. But I decided all these people called me and said, "Hey, Maureen, you know that thing you're doing with James? Can you open a school? Because COVID, we're not going to do this online stuff." So I ended up opening a micro school and being the leader there for about 18 months, and ended up hiring some really great teachers and paras and contracting with school districts for educational services at our location. And that school, I'm proud to say, is now an official Department of Education facility school, and people can get placed there through the IP process. So if you have an AAC user in your life and you're looking for an awesome school, it's called Real Life Colorado. The program is the Learning Zone at Real Life Colorado over at Wadsworth near Bowles. Um, then James kind of grew up. He grew up there and he decided, hey, I need to get into a school that has sports and activities. So we ended up going back to the 8th grade is when he started, second half of 8th grade, and then he went into Cherry Creek High School. So now he's graduating from a traditional high school. So you can see how we started off in the schools, we did our own thing, we created a micro school, and now we're back in the schools. So I think the best advice I have for parents is just take it 1 year at a time, because your kids' needs change, ages and stages change, and also offerings, like what's available, changes. So don't feel like you have to plan out your whole kid's life and like move to a neighborhood just for the school, because that may not work out. And maybe you'll have to pivot and do something else. So that's sort of my 2 cents worth. And now that James is ending his high school career, I'm like, what do I do next? What does James need next? What do his community and friends need next? And that is a place that welcomes them and accepts them for who they are. And that is the Disability Innovation Hub. And the Disability Innovation Hub is in downtown Littleton, and we are creating a amazing place to connect with other resources. So rather than me recreating the wheel and hiring a bunch of tutors, we partner with Corey, and we can connect you with him and his tutors. Instead of me being an advocate in a school, we can connect you with Evan. We also have a company coming in, or an organization coming in, who's going to be doing movement classes here and personal training for all types of disabilities. We also have a speech therapist who does adults with AAC. So we're creating kind of a place where you can connect with some really great resources in one place. So and I also have my office for my LLC here, Navigating Disability Colorado. If you want to get onto a Medicaid waiver, you can talk to me about that too. So I'm going to take it back to Corey. And the question now is going to be, maybe you can share a story about how your services have supported students, during their journey, just to demonstrate your company.
Yeah. Thank you, Maureen.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of different situations where we can support families. I think one that stands out for me is a lot of times within the IEP process, families and schools can determine that maybe the general ed classroom setting, typical school, is not the best setting for their child. And as they're looking for those alternative settings, such as Joshua School or Firefly Autism, and maybe they choose a school, but that school has a wait list. And any time, that extended time that child has out of the classroom away from academics, is a possible time where they're going to regress in either their academics or behavior, or both. So that's where we can come in, provide them that academic support, and also set them up for success in their next setting. So looking at what are their specific needs, so that they can communicate more, or that they can advocate for themselves more in the next setting. Maybe looking at what was the impetus of them having to leave their classroom and their neighborhood school, and seeing if we can support in getting them back on the right track so they can start to see success in their next setting. So
Now I'm going to ask the elephant in the room question, Corey. Who pays for it?
A lot of times, that is paid by the district.
Okay.
They recognize that they have to keep providing those service hours that are on their IEP. And that's where we can step in and provide those service hours.
Do they offer those on a silver platter, or do you have to sort of know how to ask for it?
I think you probably have to know how to ask for it. A lot of
Okay.
times, we'll be contacted after there's been negotiations with the advocate, and a lot of other maybe avenues have been exhausted.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue for our advocate, Evan.
Hey, everybody again. And I do want to give a shout out because I think there's another advocate in our midst online as well. So Meryl's incredible.
Yes.
Such a wealth of knowledge. So if there are things that you want to add, Meryl, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, we're very casual here. Everyone can participate. You're not muted or anything. You can unmute yourself.
I wasn't sure. It's nice to see you all.
Good to see you too. I guess the question was just sharing a story that demonstrates some of the work that I do through my company for students and their families. So I think there's a couple of different like baskets that I see my business working for on behalf of kids. So I do executive functioning supports for students. And so through that, I am collaborating with the school staff based on what are some of the challenges and strengths that students are having in the classroom, helping the students to come up with some ideas of strategies and skills and tools that they can use, and then trying to coach the school staff to help implement it and generalize it into their setting. And so kind of piggybacking that into some of like the IEP 504, just general school-based advocacy. Sometimes that looks like identifying goals and objectives that go along with some of those areas of need when we're talking about executive functioning. Sometimes it's talking about like what kind of methodology is being used, what are the visual supports, things like that. But just in general, I think I try to meet families where they're at. You know, if you were to reach out to me and I offer free consultations, my main goal is to find out more about your child, your learner, what's going on. Where usually by the time people reach out to me, there's some kind of disagreement or potential like conflict with the school. Honestly, the best time to reach out to an advocate is before we get to that spot, so we're not cleaning problems up. We're helping to guide and train the team along the way. But I try to figure out what are your priorities, right? And then from there, I kind of do a dive into records to figure out what information do we have to support the concerns and the asks, the requests that you all have for the school. I try to help. I think one of the biggest things that's always a component in every situation is there's usually some kind of miscommunication between school and home students. And so trying to get a sense of what was that, right? Giving them a good shot at like, let's say this in a way that the school system use the language that they understand, right? Help you to craft your requests, your desires in a way that is going to be more likely to be heard and supported with data. And then, you know, from there, it's coming up with a pathway of our strategies. So how do we get involved in repairing any harm that's kind of been done between home and school? Because at the end of the day, like the most success that's going to happen for a child is when there is frequent communication, trust, and clear understanding of what is appropriate expectations on both sides. So helping to develop that plan and then walking along the way to guide around obstacles and help with the implementation fidelity piece. So I think that's a general statement of kind of the way that I could help families like yours.
Yeah, and I think you don't know what you don't know. And I think having an advocate helps you understand the school and their perspective better. And I think that having a neutral party is always good for any more challenging conversation. So if you don't have an advocate, it's an excellent investment. I also wanted to share that James was a beneficiary of some creative thinking back in the school. So when we were doing our home and community program, we had a tutor that the school district paid for because he wasn't being able to be served in the schools. And then we actually carried that over when he returned to school. So even though he's back in a school, brick and mortar district school, he is still receiving some tutoring every day from a literacy specialist. So this is a student who has significant barriers to learning, but I just wanted to show you as we're sitting here, he wrote this whole thing on a paper with all the writing, and it's all the things he wants because he's thinking about his life after high school. He wants a new phone, a new computer, a new camera, an electric Rivian truck, food, drink, and new furniture. So, I mean, this is just an example of communication, right? So we are in between AAC devices right now, but there's more than just talking to communicate. There's sign, there's gestures, there's writing. So I just want to encourage everyone who's feeling I know at times I felt very downtrodden and pessimistic about things, but these kids just continue to amaze us. So um, keep going, one foot in front of the other. I think the other thing that is important to think about is open your mind to opportunities. I remember I went to a retreat in Phoenix. It was kind of a fancy place. I treated myself to a little yoga retreat that had massages and things just for 3 days. And I went to a lunch and I was talking to another woman there and I was like, it's just not working with schools. And she's like, well, why don't you just pull them out of the schools? And I said, well, I don't know if I could do that because then I don't know what I do. And that planted a seed in my head to say, yeah, you just need to do it. So I think sometimes we limit ourselves in our thinking and getting creative or even doing partial days. Some families find that works for them. So work with your advocate, work with your school team and keep an open mind. And also know that even if your child isn't learning in a certain situation, it doesn't mean they can't learn or that they're not learning. They're just not maybe showing it. And maybe you need to be in a different place with them. And also, ages and stages change. So what worked last year doesn't always work this year with my son, and I'm sure yours too. So the last question, I think I'm going to combine them a little bit, is maybe identify some barriers or recommendations to families. And then the last one is about us collaborating as the hub. Like, how can we work with the community and you to get more resources out there? This is sort of my first attempt at it with these Zooms, and we're going to be building and building over here at the hub so that we have a robust choice of options for families. So we'll start with Mr. Corey.
So I know a lot of times when we are speaking with families and they're exploring a lot of different options that finances can be a challenge. We really try to keep our rates reasonable for families with just an $85 an hour fee to come to the home, provide services, and we also collaborate with Rocky Mountain Human Services. So if you can
Developmental pathways too.
And developmental pathways as well. So those are both organizations that can help provide funding so that our services are either free or have a reduced price, really depending on what your schedule what kind of schedule you're looking at. A lot of times we also look to start small group sessions because that's something where we're both working on those academic piece and children are getting that socialization piece.
Maybe here at the hub.
Yes, exactly. So we have small groups that are focused around really functional skills, functional math skills, life skills. A lot of times what we see with families that come to us is they're seeking a balance for what their child is receiving. A lot of times, if your child is in maybe the general education classroom, they're getting that inclusion piece, but maybe they're not getting that direct instruction on the skills that they really need to work on. So that's where we can also step in and provide support, just to give that holistic approach in supporting a child in their development.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, Mr. Evan.
Yeah, great answers, Corey. I would say, I guess the first way that I would interpret this question of like, what are some barriers that are in place, or also the finances. And so what I always say to everybody that I have a consult with is like, I have my rates, but at the end of the day, like my goal is to help students, to help kids that are in need. So if I'm a good fit, I think the family is going to be receptive. I do whatever I can to be creative to make it work. I also am on the list for Rocky Mountain Human Services and Developmental Pathways through like the Parent Education and Advocacy Scholarship. So talk to Maureen about how to access that through waivers. But that is a great opportunity to get some guidance through that. I guess barriers that I find common for that I'm trying to break down for clients that I work with. A big part is communication. Sometimes they're not getting answers despite multiple ways of asking for it. And that is so incredibly frustrating. And so I help to, I try to be very kind and professional and respectful. But then I escalate from there of trying to, how do we get to the people that can give us answers? I help support folks with their documentation of their process so far, so that there's an adage in the world of special education that if it wasn't written down, it never happened, right? And so for some folks out there, you can have this really meaningful conversation at the IEP table. You can be expressing all of your needs in a very, very clear manner. You can walk away from that meeting feeling like everybody understands. But if none of that was written down in any way, that conversation never happened. And that translates to wasted time. And time is a finite resource, for our kids, when we're talking about access to intervention. So those are some of the things that I try to break down barriers with. I try to, a huge barrier is just the world of special education and education in general. Like I'll be the first one to say, like, I don't know everything out there. I don't. But I feel comfortable asking questions when I don't understand something or when things don't feel right. And I think one of the ways that I support families is when you're having one-on-one conversations, you might have this feeling that maybe something's off, but just let it slide. And if you have a second person who has some knowledge in those areas, that's a sounding board where if both of our alarm bells are going off, like we need to do something about that, right? And so another big barrier, and I totally get it, is something Maureen talked about earlier. It's just exhaustion. It's when you're advocating for your child to get what they need, ideally it's an easy process. It should be an easy process, but it rarely is. I think one of the things that I help is, it's not as alone when you're showing up at that table asking these things. And you have somebody else, having your back of like, yeah, I agree. Like, let's talk more about this. Let's not skip over this. Let's not steamroll through this. So those are some of the barriers that I try to break down. And yeah, those are just some things that come to mind, but I'm always willing to chat with people, and I'll make sure that my info's out there. So if I can be useful to you or someone you know, feel free to connect, and happy to talk specifics about your case and what barriers I can help with.
Awesome. And I'll wrap it up and then we'll open it to questions. So I guess we talked a lot about schools and working with IEP teams. Just realize a lot of learning goes on outside of school. So sometimes the biggest lessons are the extracurriculars, the unified sports, the friendships that are made at school, and maybe even not even a friendship, but acquaintances, right? Those are all very valuable things. So sometimes when we feel like our kids aren't achieving academically, I always tell people to look at the glass as half full because usually there's always good stuff going on. So if you're exhausted, um, take a mental break. And my gratitude list morning and night is what gets me through a lot of those hard days. So I encourage you to do that. And then also I'm hoping to do a upcoming webinar on these unschooling, homeschooling, self-directed learning, all these different options that are a little bit more out of the school. But I want to encourage you to know that a lot of those, I actually just connected with a mom that was in that self-directed learning center with James, and both of her kids are going off to CSU. I couldn't believe it. They're already in college. So these are some kids who were unschooled, and then they went back to high school, and now they're going off to CSU. So just because you do something at one stage in life, who knows what's going to happen in the future. So sometimes we do have to make decisions that may be difficult and hard, but you know your kid the best and trust yourself. That's my best advice. And now we're going to open it up to questions. So you're welcome to unmute. We're pretty casual here, and you can just speak up or ask your question out loud or raise your hand, whatever you're most comfortable with. And if you have a particular person, you can aim the question toward them.
Well, I'm just going to take this opportunity for this to be a meeting for us real quick.
Sure.
Evan, I'm not going to be able to take any new clients until at least October. So my assistant's going to be sending intakes to you and our colleague, Christina Damon. We need more advocates in the space. It's really challenging to support all of the people who need support. And I'm just so grateful that you came to Colorado and that you're committed to the work. I love working with you, and I'm just really excited to partner more over the next couple of months. There's so much happening in education with the federal government changes, and we're stronger together, and I'm going to be sending a lot of things your way. Thanks in advance for handling that. And Corey, also, I reached out to you today. The example you were sharing earlier about school districts stepping up for interim plans for placements for students when they're still responsible for offering FAPE and they are not in the position themselves to do that. We're seeing more separate school facility schools sanctioned by the state popping up, and there's an issue with private equity coming in, but we beggars can't be choosers, and we need more supports. But companies like yours who are so inclusive and can tailor individualized education services to all of students who have behavioral issues and intellectual disabilities and cognitive disabilities who can't hang in school sometimes per the district to usher them out. I'm just very grateful that you're here too, and I look forward to connecting with you on the family I reached out to you about earlier today.
Yeah, thanks, Meryl. We'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Meryl.
Yeah, we need more advocates, that's for sure. And then we also need schools that are responsive and creative. I really love the fact that there is creativity coming around in using outside specialists, because not every school or district has the type of educators or training or curriculum that our loved ones need, or the setting even. So having that flexibility is really important. And education does not have to be the district teacher in a district classroom. It can be a homebound educator that comes to your home and does education. It can be a private tutor that contracts with the school district. It can be a private program like the Forest School and the Self-Directed Learning Center that I mentioned. So luckily in Colorado, we do have kind of a robust and even growing segment that I hope to be doing more in depth in a future webinar, but I thought this time of the year it was kind of appropriate to do the uh, advocate school discussion, but also kind of share some alternative sessions. So, all right, and we have someone with their hand up, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name,
Hi,
Thais.
it's okay. It's a little complicated. Yeah, it's
Thais,
Thais
okay.
Riker. We're actually moving to Colorado not until next summer, but I'm trying to get a feel of how education system works there, schools. I have a 9-year-old son about to turn 10 who is autistic, has ADHD. He is has an IP, he's in special education, but goes to the mainstream classroom. I have had my fair share of fights with the school and advocating for him. So I specifically came to this meeting to get to know you guys a little bit more because I'm going to be looking for your services next year. Like I said, like one of you mentioned, it's much easier to start on the right note than to try to play catch up because playing catch up has not been fun. But my question most specifically now is that you guys as advocates and as being in the education system, I have heard, obviously you guys have talked a little bit about not just focusing on certain neighborhoods or certain places for school purposes. Um, but I have heard things that Douglas County School District probably not best for special needs education, Cherry Creek a little better. Do you guys have a personal opinion of where? I guess my point is I'm sure it's different kind of fights everywhere, but where am I more likely to get what he needs with the least amount of fight possible?
It depends. It really does depend. We all work with Keely Buchanan with Colorado Educational Consulting to research school options. If there's any place that you're leaning towards moving, any county that you're leaning towards, casting a wide net there, what grade is your student going to be in?
He's gonna be going to fifth grade, and as of right now, because of everything that I've just heard and read on, the pages of special education, we are planning on somewhere in Cherry Creek School District. Would
Yeah,
you
I think
tell me?
Cherry Creek and Littleton, the smaller school districts with a better tax base, frankly, they're quicker with the checkbook. They're well resourced. They are well positioned to say yes more than some of the larger metro district area districts.
Hmm.
Going into fifth grade is tough, right? Because you're about to be at a transition year. So
Yeah.
trying to target like a K-8 school or even a school that goes through high school to mitigate those transitions is something that you might want to consider. And if your student needs center-based programming, right, Evan will tell you to getting the IEP, hiring him maybe before you move to get the IEP as tight as possible because those services are going to follow your student. You don't start from scratch when you move here. So whatever the IEP says is when you land here, they have to provide for what it says while they're redoing it if they are not going to accept it entirely. So I would start working on it as soon as possible and target a school that goes through eighth grade at least if you can.
And this is the mom perspective. Yeah, I agree with Meryl on the money, basically money talks, right? And they can pay for
Yeah.
services. But I think that the most important piece is who's in front of the room, the teacher that your kid's going to be working with. So I'll give you an example. I have my oldest son. I've been parenting a long time. That's why I have the gray hair. He's 28, and when he was in second grade, I realized that he didn't know how to read. And so I tried to get the school to teach him, and they were faking the assessments. And I
Yeah.
moved him to another district school, out of district to another regular school. And because he wasn't on an IEP, we had different qualifying factors, and he didn't have the discrepancy between his grades and his performance. I put him in another school, and I went to the school and I asked them to see every third grade class in the building. I was bringing along $9,500 of state funding with me because I was coming in from out of a district and the school was under enrolled. So I was in a power position. So I was able to say, hey, I want to see every third grade and decide which teacher I want. And the secretary rolled her eyes and says, we don't do that here. Well, I went and I spent I think about 50 minutes in each classroom, and I immediately knew which teacher would be best for my son. So I went back to the office and I said, "Thank you very much. I would like Mrs. Carmack for my son." And they said, "Oh, we don't do that." And I said, "Well, then I guess I'll go down the street to the next one." And the principal ran out of her office saying, "Okay, we can put you in there." So I also encourage you, if you were narrowing it down, say, for example, you said, "Okay, I want to do Cherry Creek, and I'm deciding between these two schools." Especially if your son is in the center-based program, I would definitely go and spend some time there, and not just the dog and pony show from the teacher and the principal, but actually sit and watch instructions, see how the teachers interact with children and the vibe you get, because you're kind of making a huge financial decision, and the people that work with your kids the most are the most important. So that's just my mom and teacher perspective.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that.
And where are you coming from?
We're coming from Texas.
Oh, okay, well, it'll go better here. It'll look better here than in Texas. I
Yeah,
work when people come from Massachusetts or New York because they have a lot of money there. But yeah, we just have a member here at the hub who just moved here from Dallas 2 weeks ago, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff here compared to Texas." So I think you're going to be positively impressed, I hope.
yeah, I've been so far. I see people commenting on the special needs page, things that, you guys have access there that I'm like, this is all coming out of my pocket right now, private pay. Like, we don't get
Yeah.
any of that.
Yeah, and then we should also talk about getting your son on a waiver because that will generate other funding as well. So
Yeah.
definitely follow up with me and Evan. And then Katie has her hand up. We
And
can go to her
sorry,
next.
just to also throw in a thought in there too. I think schools and how effective IEP teams are, it's very dependent on who is in that team that year, right? And so I think it's very challenging when you're trying to narrow it down to a school or something that you're hearing positive feedback about right now, because a year from now, they could have a new administrator. It could be somebody has burnt out and left, and that makes a huge change, right? So I think one of the big things that I would also encourage you, like Meryl said, we definitely would want to make sure that like your IEP is very much up to date, like going through, things that often happen are, especially when students have been part of a school for a few years, people take for granted that they're maybe doing some more things that aren't actually documented in the IEP, right? So things that I would always encourage folks before transitions from one level to another is like go in with a fresh set of eyes and notice all of the environmental supports that are there and think about like if they didn't have those, is that something we would need to build into the IEP, right? So having that conversation around, whether there's additional assessments that we would want to try to knock out before you leave, those would be big things. But other huge part is what is it that your child needs? When you think about your child as a learner, like what do they need? Because that could really help determine how important X resource is. If it's something your kiddo's not going to need, right? Which might be a good thing for you to have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, and I put in the chat, it's Keely Buchanan, and I think is it Colorado Educational Consulting? I don't know, Meryl, if you could stick her.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing too, I had a family move here, I don't know, maybe the year before last school year. And the student had a para in real life, but it never said it on their IEP. And I'm so glad that we caught it because they were able to update the IEP that stipulated the allocation for the dedicated adult support. So when they were coming here, right, that position was posted to staff for at their new school, right? It doesn't, we don't just go off the honor system like, hey, my kid's one-on-one in line of sight with someone because they elope and everyone knows it. It needs to say it in the documentation. It's something that we caught before they came here, and it was, um, you know, you overlook things like that when things are going well where you are and you have established these relationships, and you might not notice it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, do you have another question?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Two questions. One is just a quick logistical question. When we wrap up today, will we get everyone's or all the organizations' names, contact info?
Yeah,
So
I'll
we
put
can
that in email.
follow up?
Everyone that registered or signed in to come tonight, I'll send an email out and include everybody. Yes.
Awesome. And then a second question that whoever would
Yeah.
like to chime in, we'd love to hear from you. We have two kids. They're just starting seventh and ninth grade, so we're just starting high school. They both have their own individual things, but similar profiles. They both have FASDs, so fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So um, memory is a very huge challenge for us. Executive functioning, which sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, we have these great school supports for our children who are autistic. Uh, Often does not work the same for our FASD kiddos, right? So we're sometimes having to turn down supports because they're almost harmful, right? Other than that, just yeah, lots of memory, much slower processing speeds, things like that. So, um, and kind of functional ages about half of their biological ages. So, as you can imagine, we're jumping into high school. It's kind of like having a 7-year-old who's got a brain injury and dementia and ADHD and throwing them into a typical, you know, high school classroom. And as you can imagine, it's not going well, which we anticipated. And I think we've tried just about every educational setting that's available. We homeschooled last year and just there, everything has always had its pros and its cons, right? And we're kind of back, we're at it's in our district, we're in Adams 12. It's 5-star online academy, so it's kind of hybrid, right? And our hope in doing that was that all day, every day is very challenging for both kids. It's too much sensory overload, it's too much social overload, too much trying to learn things that are really, really hard overload, right? So this is a bit more sometimes with a teacher, sometimes not, sometimes in person, sometimes not. We're hoping that would bring some balance. There's also a lot of opportunity for the kids to work like one-on-one with a teacher on some independent work. Those things are seeming great. We've also so far um, really optimistic about the responses we're getting from their IEP coordinator, all that. But because we homeschooled last year and before that, they were in kind of a charter school that was for kids with learning and behavioral challenges where kind of like somebody just mentioned, there was a ton of environmental supports that are not documented in the IEP, right? So those are not currently in place, and we're going to be able to ask for them soon when we start having meetings. So especially for our daughter, one thing is her IEP coordinator pointed out there's no modifications currently. So something like a reduced workload not in there currently, right? And so we kind of feel like, A, we're not sure what all is possible, right? Like we can kind of dream and say we think this would help, but we don't know what what are options that schools sometimes do for kids like ours that we could ask for that maybe we haven't even thought of. And we'll ask for everything we're dreaming of too, but what suggestions do people have about modifications that sometimes get added, accommodations as well, all that good stuff? Or are there resources like, hey, here's a list of things to consider that might be helpful?
Yeah, well, this is
I,
my
I
my
if
mom's
you
answer first is get an advocate because you really need help to do that and update
sure.
everything. So that's my advice because it's a lot. You have a lot on your plate and you need that support. So that's my comment.
You also really need to reframe your question, right? You should never ever think about, what can the school offer or what can they do or what might they do? The only question that you're answering is what does my student need? Right? So when you think about making a list of like pie in the sky, best case scenario, that's definitely where you're starting, right? Um, because you don't want to help so much that you're hurting, right? If you provide so many modifications, curricular modifications or accommodations to the environment, that might not be helpful. But I wonder, have you talked yet with Angie? Has she been in your meetings yet?
Angie, I don't think I know Angie.
She's the director who supervises that department in your school district, and she's pretty amenable
And is she
to
involved in the
reasonable.
online school too, Meryl?
Yeah, yeah, she oversees that too.
Okay.
Yeah,
pushes
I
district
think
staff. Okay.
building a relationship with the actual decision makers too, or right, like having Evan do that on your behalf is a really good use of time because it's a long-term relationship, right? And when you're asking for things, you know, it goes a long way to know the people who can say yes or no. And you can ask, you can the curricular modifications and accommodations are they often get confused. But abbreviated work, for example, is an accommodation, right? You're not changing the standard that you're measuring. You're not changing the skill that you're measuring. So I think, yeah, writing out a list with a good thinking partner like Evan and figuring out, this is my student's profile. These are their goals. This is how we're going to get there, and then working towards those outcomes. And again, building good relationships with the people who are going to be supplementing all of that.
Yeah, and a way that we can support in this, Meryl, this is something that obviously we've done together is when we work with a student, we can provide reports on not just maybe what their academic level would be, but what type of supports they need to be successful, not just in a one-on-one tutoring setting, but in a classroom setting. So what are the accommodations? What are the modifications they need to be able to access their learning? And that's something that our education coaches can do while we're working with them, and then communicating that with the school, the district, with the advocates, so that there is a professional who has some background, who can work directly with your child and kind of figure those things out. It's almost, I don't know, I don't want to get too far into it, but it's kind of a dynamic assessment of process where we're looking at what works for this child and what helps them to be able to show what they know. And then we can help communicate that information so that that can get onto an IEP.
Yeah, and thank you, Corey. I would say exactly those same things, right? Of how do we figure out what a child needs? So obviously, as a parent, as a guardian, like you have thoughts about what they need. Those are very, very valid and important, depending on kind of which school district, what the exact situation is. They're also going to want to see data around that too. So if we need to figure out assessments, whether it's through the schools or through people like Corey and his practice, or through people that are doing psychoeducational evaluations, that's incredibly important. But exactly what Meryl said is, what is it that the kid needs? And in order to figure that out, it's also incredibly important to figure out, like, where are they right now? Where are their strengths? Where are maybe some skills that are that need to be supported and scaffolded up, where those things are? And once we have that comprehensive picture, not just looking at academically, we're looking at executive functioning, social, emotional, behavioral, independent living skills. Once we know that, then it's much more easy to say, all right, we've identified what the areas of need are. Now let's think creatively. What can we put in place? How often does that thing need to happen, right? And build from there. So that's kind of the approach that I really like to take, is
Yeah, and
get
then
that data and move from it.
and I think to tag on to Evan is, I also wonder if online learning is the best way for your kids to learn. They may need that direct, side by side instruction and I also think I empathize with you because I'm thinking you have all this on your plate. Now they're not going to school and giving you a break, right? Now they're at home doing online school. So to me, I'm also thinking getting you some support in having some educators maybe work with them rather than everything online, because I imagine you're having to do a lot of support to do online learning. So that would also be, think of yourself too in getting some support so that you get a little break, because we have to preserve ourselves.
Definitely.
Awesome. Any other questions from our members or comments? Or maybe suggestions or things that you want in upcoming expert panels? We like to give a pause in education to let people process things, right? Well, if not, no questions. If you change your mind, raise your hand. I want to thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate you coming. I also want to give another shameless plug for the hub. It's in downtown Littleton, and we offer space that is accepting and supportive. And it's near James's future apartment, he wants me to say, half a block away. So, yeah.
It's a very, very cool
And
space.
we are working on some programming. We're going to be getting some other providers. So I'm in the opinion of not wanting to reinvent the wheel. So I'm bringing in some other organizations that will be providing some things on site, like maybe some functional math skills on Saturday with Corey and his amazing tutors. Also a spirit club movement-based program organization that's going to come in and do some classes here. We also have a speech therapist joining, going to be using some office space here. So we're building up things, and we also have an employment specialist for those that may have older loved ones and interested in employment, because that's a very motivating thing to work on a lot of other related skills. And then secondly, I have an LLC called Navigating Disability Colorado. And sorry, I apologize. It is not my company. It is my and James. It's our company. He corrected me. He is absolutely right. Because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing it. Navigating Disability Colorado helps people get on Medicaid waivers and maximize supports. Because, like I mentioned earlier, I was able to do 40 hours a week of a skilled, highly skilled special ed teacher because I paired the waiver funding with ABA funding. And I was able to do that because I knew how to do it. So we can help you waivers and other medical things like ABA or other OT, PT speech can augment and actually create an educational program. So I'd love to talk more about that if you're interested. And I will send an email out with the link to the recording, also the contacts for everyone on this call. And you can always reply to that email and I will read it. So I just want to thank again for our panelists who came and spent their evening with us. Thank you to Corey and to Evan and to James and to Meryl. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Send me ideas for future panels. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
to
you.
the folks that shared stories about their family.
Yeah, that
Trusted
makes,
the group, so
yeah.
appreciate that.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody.